Okay, here is, we're doing the next part of this book here, book review, British Imagination by Peter Watson. We'll talk briefly about the King James Bible. Came out in 1611. There's a lot of fighting in England between the different religious groups, you know, the Anglicans, the Puritans, the Catholics, okay, and King James wanted more control of the church himself. And so the King James Bible is considered one of the most famous, most authoritative Bibles. If you listen to some of the Protestants, they'll say it goes back to the original text of the Bible in Greek and Hebrew, and that it's the best Bible. I'm not buying that. Okay, I'm a Catholic, and you know the Catholic Church continues right straight to the life of Christ in St. Peter. Okay, that's the one that's there at the beginning. The Protestants just showed up with Martin Luther in 1517. Okay, I think they're kind of a joke in comparison to the Catholic Church. But anyways, I'm just letting you know, a lot of people think the King James Bible is the best. What I do like about the King James Bible is it's pretty well written. And the main reason it's written so well is most of it comes from this guy right here, William Tyndale. He was a brilliant original translator into the English of that time, the vernacular of his time. And it's just eloquent. It's just aesthetically beautiful. Sometimes it's a little too primitive, but it's great. You got to remember, this is around the time of Shakespeare, and Shakespeare's English, okay? There's three things in the Bible you have to read or you're an ignoramus. You have to read Genesis, you have to read Proverbs, and you have to read the Gospels. And of these, you know, Genesis and the Gospels are the most important. The reason I say you have to read that, if you want to be able to understand English literature and English history and the history of Western civilization, you know, tons of it is based on the events of Genesis and the Gospels. There's no way around that. The Gospels are where you have are basically the life of Christ. Okay, and you have to know that, or you can't read English literature intelligently. You can't understand the literature of Western civilization if you haven't read that. You're an ignoramus. If you got more time, there's plenty of other things you could read too. You could read Acts, Revelations, and other parts of the Bible, depending on how much time you have. I'll just show you some other stuff for what it's worth. I wrote a book here called Rhyme, Rhetoric, and Logic. It's in like its 4th edition now, all about how to learn how to write. It came out of me wanting to learn how to write better because, you know, I got an A in my writing class at Stanford, but when I started writing books, I have a bunch of friends that are lawyers, and they told me basically there were all kinds of problems with my writing. It was not as sophisticated as they felt it should be with regard to punctuation. And so I studied all the rhetoric and stuff. Here's the book. I'll show it to you. It's kind of a big monster of a book. It's like, what, 540 pages. Everything you could, like having a PhD in writing. I read everything you could read on writing. But anyways, you don't have to go through that. But the reason I mention it is I have a whole big chapter on religious writing, religious syntax, the registers. You know, you have the registers of high speech for formal diction and a formal presentation. You have religious register style of writing. Then you have common parlance amongst educated people level of diction. And then you have low diction, like, you know, how you talk to a child, how you have a transactional conversation with an uneducated person. But anyways, if you want to be a great writer, I think you have to study the Bible. I mean, how could you, the most important book ever written in the history of man, how could you have not read at least part of it, okay? And there's a lot of the greatest writers, like look at John Ruskin, the great art critic from England in the mid-1800s, the great Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood speech. It's all based on that powerful religious syntax. And, you know, religious writing has multiple meanings, this spiritual, higher meaning. In order to write, it's incredibly emotional, okay? The difference between life and death, heaven and hell, binary opposition. If you want, one of the reasons why my nutritional talks are some of the best, probably the best ever, is because I don't back off from the religious component. If you don't have religion, your science will stink and your education will stink. Everything goes to crap without religion. You know, atheism destroys everything. It's a destroyer. Christianity is the builder, the giver of life, and it makes things work. Yeah, there's plenty of nonsense in Christianity, plenty of BS Christians, but the basic ideas of Christianity, tell the truth, do what's right, man is created in the image of God, the message of Christ, that's all good. Now, the other stuff, nobody's ever going to agree on. One of the reasons why you don't hear me arguing about Old Testament, you don't hear me arguing about the different Protestant sects and everything is because I think it's a waste of time. I've read thousands and thousands of pages of Bible commentary, and the conclusion I've come to after all that study is that they're never going to agree, they're never going to get along. And it doesn't matter. The message of Christ doesn't change from one version of the Bible to another. What changes is things like who should control the church, who should appoint the bishops, what's the true meaning of such and such a story in the Bible. And I really don't care about that. The message of Christ doesn't change. Be nice, love thy neighbor, try to get along, give people the benefit of the doubt, follow the 10 Commandments, but the most important one is be nice to each other. So anyways, I hope you found that helpful.